What if an NFL team wasn't just drafting a quarterback, but rebuilding its entire offense before even announcing him? Right now, a strange rumor is floating around Cleveland. Reports suggest the team could be preparing to replace every single starting offensive lineman, all 5 spots. In modern football, that almost never happens. Teams change one piece, maybe two, but the whole protection unit at once. That only happens when a franchise is about to reshape its identity. And that's where things get interesting. Because this kind of reset usually isn't random. It happens when a front office already knows what type of quarterback they want, how he throws, how fast he reads defenses, and what system he needs to succeed from day one. Which raises the question fans can't stop asking. Is this just a rebuild? Or is Cleveland quietly preparing the perfect landing spot for Shedeur Sanders? To understand why this rumor has people talking, we have to start with the one detail that makes it feel very real. In the NFL, nothing tells you more about a team's future than the offensive line. Not the receivers, not the running backs, not even the quarterback room. The line is the blueprint. It reveals what style of football a franchise plans to play before they ever say it publicly. That's why this Cleveland rumor raised eyebrows so fast. Replacing one lineman usually means injury or contract issues. Replacing 2 means a scheme change. But replacing all 5 starters, that only happens when the coaching staff believes the current unit physically cannot run the offense they're about to install. And that matters because different quarterbacks require completely different protection philosophies. Some quarterbacks survive behind power lines built for the run game, heavy bodies, slower feet, long-developing play-action passes. Others need agile pass protectors who can hold blocks longer, forming a pocket that stays clean while deeper routes unfold downfield. Shedeur Sanders falls into the second category. His game isn't built around panic scrambles or quick one-read throws. It's timing, patience, and precision. He stands tall, lets routes develop, and trusts the pocket. That style works beautifully when protection is structured, but it collapses fast when pressure arrives early. We saw flashes of both outcomes throughout his college career: brilliance when protected, chaos when rushed. So if a team expects to bring in that type of quarterback, they don't just tweak the line, they redesign it from scratch. Think about the logic from a front office perspective. Drafting a high-profile passer while keeping a struggling line is a gamble that ruins development. But building the protection first, that's long-term planning. It means the organization isn't trying to survive year one, they're trying to accelerate it. Now look at Cleveland's timing. Multiple picks, roster flexibility, cap space opening. Suddenly discussions about reworking the trenches start appearing, not after the draft, before it. That's the part that has analysts paying attention. Teams usually react to their quarterback choice. Here, it almost looks like preparation. And preparation suggests confidence. It suggests the franchise already has a profile in mind. A quarterback who thrives when upright, attacks vertically, and punishes defenses once rhythm is established. A passer who changes how you design protections rather than adapting to the ones already there. But the offensive line rumor alone is what pushed this conversation into overdrive. Because once people looked past the trenches, they noticed the pass catchers, and that might be an even louder hint. After the offensive line talk surfaced, fans started doing something they hadn't done in months, actually studying Cleveland's receiver room. On paper, it looked average, a mix of young targets, developing route runners, and a few vertical threats. Nothing that screamed, "win now" offense. But when you stop looking at the names and start looking at the types of receivers, a very specific picture appears. Speed on the outside, stretch the field ability, players comfortable tracking deep balls rather than living on short timing routes. That's not random roster construction. Different quarterbacks create different receiver ecosystems. Some passers thrive with possession targets who separate quickly in short areas. Others unlock value from receivers who can run longer routes and attack space 20–40 yards downfield. Shedeur's style leans heavily toward the second. He isn't just throwing to open windows, he throws to developing windows. He waits for safeties to move. He manipulates leverage. Then he delivers the ball where only his receiver can adjust to it. That type of quarterback quietly raises the value of speed receivers because they don't need to win instantly, they just need time. Now think about why a team would build that kind of room before confirming a quarterback. It removes adjustment time. Rookie quarterbacks normally struggle not because they can't throw, but because the system doesn't match them yet. Coaches install simplified playbooks, receivers run shorter concepts, and the offense becomes predictable. Defenses crowd the line, and development slows. But if the roster already fits the quarterback's natural habits, the learning curve shrinks dramatically. The offense doesn't have to shrink, it can expand early. And that's where the Cleveland speculation gets louder. Instead of stacking possession receivers who demand quick releases, the roster quietly favors players who benefit from extended plays and deeper route trees. That kind of structure rewards patience and ball placement rather than panic throws. Fans started connecting the dots. New protection philosophy, field stretching receivers, multiple draft assets. It begins to look less like a rebuild and more like an offensive identity waiting for its trigger. But roster construction alone doesn't create buzz. What really fueled the conversation were the clips, reminders of the type of quarterback this setup would be built for. Because when people went back and watched the throws again, the fit suddenly didn't feel hypothetical anymore. Then the highlights started circulating again, and that's when opinions shifted. Not the flashy social media edits with dramatic music, but full-speed game sequences. Third downs, pressure looks, broken pockets, late rotations. The type of plays that actually translate to Sundays. What stood out wasn't just arm strength. Plenty of quarterbacks can throw far. What stood out was decision patience. He didn't panic at the first sign of pressure. He slid, reset, waited for leverage to flip, and then delivered the ball after the defense already believed the play was over. That trait matters more in the NFL than any measurable. College defenses fail because of talent gaps. NFL defenses fail because of timing manipulation. The quarterback who forces defenders to cover longer than they want eventually wins, even without perfect protection. And ironically, that connects right back to the offensive line situation people were worried about. If a team expects immediate elite protection, they draft a rhythm passer. If they expect chaos early, they draft a problem solver. Several plays showed exactly that, escaping pressure without abandoning the concept, keeping eyes downfield instead of instantly running, throwing receivers open rather than waiting for separation. Those are veteran behaviors, not just athletic ones. And fans noticed something else. The throws weren't reckless. There's a difference between aggressive and desperate. Aggressive quarterbacks attack tight windows they understand. Desperate quarterbacks attack windows because they ran out of options. The clips leaned heavily toward calculated aggression. Safeties were moved before the throw. Corners were influenced before the release. That's anticipation, and anticipation shortens rebuild timelines. It's also why the online debate suddenly changed tone. Instead of arguing whether he could play at the next level, people started arguing how fast he could stabilize an offense. And that's a very different discussion. Because rebuilding teams usually protect rookies from complexity. But occasionally, a roster looks like it's being designed to handle complexity immediately. If the offensive line is young and the receivers stretch vertically, the quarterback must process quickly enough to keep defenses honest. Otherwise, the plan collapses. So the film didn't end the debate, it redirected it. The question stopped being, is he talented enough? It became, is the team preparing for him already? And that's where the draft conversation started heating up. Right after those clips resurfaced, attention shifted to something most fans ignored at first, the draft capital. Multiple early selections don't just give a team options, they reveal intention. Rebuilding teams normally spread picks across positions. A defender here, a depth piece there, maybe a developmental lineman late. But when a franchise quietly stacks premium selections in the same year, it usually means they're preparing for a timeline shift. Not a slow rebuild, a synchronized reset. And that's exactly what people began noticing. Instead of filling one hole at a time, the roster construction hinted at building around a single arrival point. When teams expect a quarterback to sit and learn, they prioritize defense first. But when they anticipate immediate play, they accelerate offensive infrastructure. The interesting part, the predictions coming out weren't centered on splash skill players. Analysts were linking picks to linebackers, linemen, and structural pieces, the kind of moves that stabilize games rather than win headlines. That matters. Young quarterbacks don't actually fail because of talent gaps most of the time. They fail because the roster around them forces them into hero football every Sunday. If a front office wants clean evaluations, they remove chaos. They build a team that allows wins through execution, not miracles. And suddenly, the pick positioning looked less random and more coordinated. Fans also noticed the order of priorities. Instead of chasing one superstar receiver, the conversation leaned toward depth, multiple playable options, rather than one expensive solution. That type of roster design only works when the quarterback distributes the ball instead of locking onto targets, which again matched the film people were just watching. So speculation grew. This wasn't about finding a quarterback and then building later. It looked like the building had already begun, and the quarterback decision would finalize it. That's when mock drafts became louder and stranger. Some projections linked the team to defensive upgrades early, offensive support next, and developmental protection pieces after. That sequencing suggested confidence in timing, almost like the organization believed the offense could function quickly as long as the environment stayed balanced. Not everyone agreed, of course. Some argued it was just standard roster management. But the alignment between the film traits and roster moves kept feeding the theory. Because when strategy and player profile accidentally match, people call it coincidence. When they keep matching repeatedly, people start calling it preparation. And if that preparation was real, the upcoming decision wouldn't just shape a season. It would define the direction of the franchise for years. As the roster talk heated up, the media conversation started splitting into two completely different directions. One side focused on risk. They pointed to roster turnover, the uncertainty of replacing protection, and the pressure of expectations. Their argument was simple: no young quarterback should walk into that much instability. From that perspective, patience mattered more than potential. Build the team first, then insert the passer. But the other side saw the exact opposite. They argued instability is precisely why certain quarterbacks are chosen early, not to finish a roster, but to stabilize it. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions, some organizations believe the right player creates order immediately. The scheme forms around him, teammates elevate, and roles suddenly become clearer. That philosophical divide explains why every report sounded completely different depending on who delivered it. Some analysts framed the situation as dangerous pressure. Others framed it as rare opportunity. And then the debate moved beyond football. Because quarterbacks entering the league now don't just bring mechanics, they bring presence. Attention changes locker rooms. Energy changes expectations. Once cameras and conversations center on one position, accountability across the roster increases. Veterans prepare differently. Coaches simplify communication. The environment sharpens. So the discussion quietly shifted from talent evaluation to organizational identity. Would the team play cautious and gradual, or bold and immediate? Even small stories fed the divide. Positive practice reports were praised by one group and dismissed as hype by another. Development clips were either proof of readiness or proof expectations were premature. Every detail became confirmation depending on what someone already believed. That's when fans noticed something interesting. The argument wasn't really about throws anymore. It was about philosophy. Some believe teams must protect young quarterbacks from pressure. Others believe certain quarterbacks reduce pressure simply by existing within the offense. And whichever theory the front office believed would dictate the entire draft strategy. Because selecting a quarterback early isn't just choosing a player, it's choosing a timeline. And judging by the growing intensity of reactions, people suspected the organization had already picked which timeline they wanted. The only thing left was whether the official decision would confirm what the signs had been hinting at all along. Once the philosophical debate cooled down, the attention shifted to something more concrete, the draft board. And suddenly, the clues began lining up in a way that didn't feel accidental anymore. Having multiple early picks changes how a team approaches roster building. Most organizations use those selections to patch holes across the depth chart. But occasionally, a front office treats those picks differently, not as repairs, but as support beams. Instead of spreading talent around, they concentrated around one position to accelerate development. That's exactly why analysts began re-examining the order of priorities. If protection truly needed a full reset, the early rounds wouldn't just be about best player available. They'd be about compatibility, athletic linemen instead of heavier anchors, guards who could move laterally, tackles capable of holding longer pass sets. Every trait would hint at the type of offense they planned to run rather than just filling vacancies. And that's when observers noticed something subtle. Defensive prospects were appearing slightly later in projections than expected. Not ignored, just delayed. That matters because draft boards often reveal intentions before coaches do. If an organization delays defensive help despite clear need, it usually means they want the offense stable first. A defense can adjust weekly. A young quarterback's development can't. Continuity matters more than balance in year one of a new offensive identity. Another interesting layer came from the receiver room conversation. Instead of chasing veteran names, discussion centered around speed and separation. Younger route runners, yards after catchability, and spacing concepts started appearing in predictions. Those are traits tied less to traditional pocket systems and more to rhythm timing attacks, schemes designed to let a quarterback play fast mentally rather than hold the ball physically. So piece by piece, a pattern emerged. Mobile offensive linemen, quick separating receivers, early offensive investment, defensive patience. Individually, each move could mean anything. Together, they pointed to a coordinated plan. Teams don't reshape multiple position groups simultaneously unless they're building around a specific operating style. An operating style always traces back to the person delivering the ball. That realization changed how people interpreted every rumor afterward. Instead of asking if the team might commit to a new direction, the conversation shifted to how soon they wanted the transition complete. Because once draft capital starts aligning toward one side of the ball, organizations rarely reverse course mid-process. They follow through. Which meant the upcoming decisions weren't going to be cautious or temporary. They were going to define the next era immediately. There's another side to all of this that rarely shows up in headlines: expectations. A roster reset sounds exciting on paper. New linemen, new scheme, new chemistry. But for a young quarterback, it creates a very specific type of pressure. Not the pressure of competing for a job, the pressure of being the reason the entire organization just hit the reset button. Because once a franchise rebuilds the protection around you, the message is clear without anyone saying it publicly. This offense now moves at your pace. Veterans in the locker room understand that immediately. Offensive linemen don't change technique unless the play style demands it. Receivers don't alter route depth unless timing changes. Even play calling shifts, fewer slow-developing concepts, more rhythm throws, more movement pockets, more decisions made before the snap instead of after the hit. And that's when the spotlight intensifies. Now every incompletion feels louder. Every sack sparks questions, not because mistakes are unusual, but because the organization just committed resources to prevent them. Fair or not, fans begin measuring growth weekly instead of seasonally. Patience shrinks when investment grows. But there's an interesting flip side. When teammates know the plan is long-term, accountability changes. Instead of competing agendas inside the huddle, roles become clearer. Linemen protect longer because they know the quarterback trusts the pocket. Receivers keep running routes because the ball could arrive late but accurately. The offense starts functioning as a unit rather than individual reactions. That's why some insiders weren't worried about early struggles. They were watching communication instead. Small moments reveal development more than stat sheets. A lineman pointing out a blitz before the snap. A receiver adjusting depth without looking to the sideline. A quarterback resetting protection instead of calling timeout. Those details don't trend online, but they signal trust forming in real time. Still, the outside noise never stops. Analysts debate readiness. Commentators compare timelines. Social media measures every drive against expectations built before a single snap of the season. And that's where things become delicate. If the team wins early, the rebuild looks genius. If the team struggles early, the rebuild looks rushed. Same plan, different interpretation. Which means the real challenge isn't just performance, it's perception. Managing a fan base while teaching a system is one of the hardest balancing acts in sports, especially when the roster construction itself tells everyone a long-term bet has already been placed. And as preseason approached, one question quietly replaced all others. Not whether the offense would change, but how long people would wait for it to work. Then came the part of the offseason where theories meet reality, the draft. All the talk about protection, patience, and development suddenly had a deadline. Because once selections were announced, fans could finally see whether the organization truly committed to building around the young quarterback, or if the reset was just temporary damage control. And immediately, analysts noticed something unusual. Instead of chasing flashy skill players early, the focus leaned heavily toward stability. Bigger bodies, experienced starters, players known more for discipline than highlight reels. The kind of picks that rarely trend online but quietly shape seasons. That decision told a story. Teams rebuilding for quick excitement usually prioritize weapons first, receivers, speed, explosive playmakers. But teams planning long-term growth invest in structure. Protection first. Communication first. Fewer mistakes before bigger plays. It doesn't win headlines, it wins time. Because the truth about young quarterbacks is simple. Talent determines ceiling, but environment determines timeline. Without structure, development turns chaotic. Every game becomes survival. Mechanics break down, reads speed up, and confidence fades. But with structure, the game slows. Decisions improve. The quarterback starts dictating the defense instead of reacting to it. That's what the front office appeared to be betting on. Still, not everyone agreed. Some fans questioned the lack of immediate explosiveness. Others argued the offense needed star power, not patience. Debates exploded online. Was this a safe rebuild or a missed opportunity to surround the quarterback with elite playmakers right away? Both sides had a point. Because drafting for stability sacrifices short-term excitement. Early games might look conservative. Fewer deep shots, more controlled drives, more field position football. It can feel slow until the system clicks. And when it clicks, the offense stops relying on hero moments. Instead of one big play saving a drive, every snap contributes. 5-yard gains matter. Third and short conversions matter. Suddenly defenses stay on the field longer, and the quarterback throws from comfort rather than urgency. But that type of offense demands patience from everyone, coaches, players, and especially fans. The front office essentially made a quiet promise. They weren't building the fastest offense in the league. They were building the most sustainable one. Now the pressure shifted again. No longer about talent. No longer about protection. Now it became about timing. How quickly could chemistry form between players who hadn't played together before? How long before communication turned instinctive? And most importantly, would the fan base wait long enough to see it develop? Because once the roster philosophy became clear, the season stopped being a test of ability. It became a test of belief. By the time the off-season dust settled, the situation wasn't really about one player anymore. It was about direction. The organization chose patience over panic, structure over noise. Instead of forcing instant fireworks, they committed to building a foundation that could last beyond a single season. And that decision quietly changed expectations. Success was no longer measured by early wins, but by visible growth, cleaner pockets, calmer reads, smarter decisions. Of course, that kind of plan always divides a fan base. Some want proof now. Others understand development takes time. But history shows quarterbacks rarely fail because of talent alone. They fail when timelines get rushed. So the real question moving forward isn't whether the flashes are there. They already are. It's whether everyone involved is willing to let the process unfold long enough for those flashes to become consistency. Because if patience holds, the story won't be about surviving the rebuild. It'll be about why it worked.